Nice to have you with us on a Wednesday afternoon on this 18th day of January, the year 2018, as we talked about what's going on as far as the world of sports is concerned. Welcome, folks, as we chatter away and bring you home on a midweek program. Eddie Erickson today, Colin Schmeling today. We got a lot to do. Obviously, plenty of football. Peter, who had his podcast yesterday, so we get Pete on today at 4 o'clock. We look forward to Peter. Ira today, he's going to try to defend Mike Tomlin. We do that in the course of our afternoon with plenty of football today, and we will spend a lot of time today, at least at the beginning of the show and at the end of the show, on the great JoJo White, because this is my swing zone, the great Celtic who passed away yesterday at the age of 71 after a Hall of Fame career which included 2 championships. Went to Kansas, and obviously the Celtics played Golden State too, but a wonderful guard, good scorer, averaged about 18, 19 a game, and really a big part of those 2 championship teams that Boston won in the Havlicek-Cowens era. The head coach of JoJo during that time period was the great Tommy Heinsohn. You haven't talked to Tommy in a while, and he's always fun. Always have a lot of fun. Skip, Tom, nice to talk. Christopher Russo, good to have you with us again. How are you today, okay?
Very good, and, I'm glad people are recognizing JoJo. He was such an integral part of really a very, very dedicated basketball team. They're all so competitive, and he was one of the top competitors.
He was great. You're broken up here, Tom, a little bit. Now, let's go through this for a sec, because I'm not even sure. When Bill retired with that last championship as player-coach, did you take over the next year as the head coach?
Well, in 76 we won. I coached in 77, and I left in the middle of the season in 78.
Now, how about when Bill left, Russell left in 68, 69? Did you take over 69, 70 right away, or is there some? You did.
No, I took over after Russell retired after the playoffs, where they beat Wilt, and Wilt didn't come back into the game in the 7th game out there, and Russell had enough after all those years. And so I was doing the broadcasts with Red Auerbach, believe it or not, as my color guy.
You were doing the play-by-play, Tommy, in that 68, 69 season? How about that, huh? Look at that.
Yeah. We did 25 road games, and Red was my color guy. So we did that final game, too. And it was really sensational.
And then you took over, so you took the job. That was your first head coaching job, and JoJo was a rookie on that team, and you got him involved right away. Came out of Kansas, 9th pick in the draft. Tell me about that first training camp that you had with JoJo there in 1969 as you the head coach.
Well, JoJo didn't join us until the season had already started, because he was in the Marines for 6 months. And, that was the period of time where you potentially had to go into the service for 2 years. But he got into a reserve Marine unit and was there for 6 months, and then did reserve duty after that. But so he came in early in November, and Larry Siegfried was our starting guard at that point. But JoJo quickly showed that he was a top scorer and really knew how to motor the ball up the floor, which is really what we were looking for as an up-tempo team.
And that was a transitional team, because that was before Cowens and after Russell. So you had Havlicek, but then you got good right away, Tommy. But that is a transitional team, and JoJo and Havlicek really sort of set the tempo for the success you had in the mid-'70s. How about that for a sec?
Yeah, we had Don Chaney, too, in the backcourt, and we had Henry Finkel, Richie Johnson, and Bad News Bonds. So we called that the three-headed center. We used that to really try and annihilate the other center by running them hard up the floor, making them sprint on every possession. And it proved to be an element that I incorporated during the entire my coaching career. But Cowens was a single-head center pretty much because he could do it as a superior athlete.
Did you know JoJo right away? Did you guys, obviously ninth pick in the draft, so you had high hopes for him, and probably not disappointing. He averaged 12 points a game that rookie year, Tommy, for you. Shot 45%, played 60 games. So he really had a pretty good rookie year in 1969-70. You know that?
Yes, he did. And really, I mean, he had to learn up-tempo basketball. He played at Kansas, wasn't quite the tempo that we had to play at as a smallish team. And what he did was master playing up quick. I mean, he was a superior athlete. And he was also a terrific competitor. One of the things that I remember about JoJo, I remember a couple of real things that impressed the heck out of me. I mean, that triple overtime game that we won
against Phoenix.
Suns.
Yep.
Yeah, and then we won the next game for the title. But JoJo played the entire game, and it was a triple overtime, and I can remember him not being able to get off the floor. He was sitting down on the floor, and he was really bushed. But he ended up the MVP of that series, and deservedly so, because he made all the big baskets and played some great defense and really masterminded a lot of what we were doing.
Was that 75? That was the 75-76 Celtics, and you also beat the Bucks in 73-74, Tommy. Which was the better team?
I think the 73-74 team. The year before, we won 68 games. And we got knocked out by the Knicks.
Well, Havlicek was hurt in that series, was he not?
Right. He was hurt, and he ended up playing the last game lefty. And so, we were really the cream of the crop the year before we beat Milwaukee. But Milwaukee was Goliath, and we were David in that series. They had the home court advantage, and it was really a series in which each team was capable of beating the other on their home courts. We were going back into Boston for the sixth game with the possibility of ending the series there, and Kareem hit a sky hook in overtime to beat us.
Yeah, what a great shot. Shot.
And then we went to Milwaukee, and we changed the defensive tactics, and we doubled Kareem, and we made Cornell Warner try and make the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out for them. We got 17 points up, and we kind of coasted to the title. So JoJo was a significant part of all of that. The other thing that I remember, he really wanted to be one of the top flight players. And when we played the Knicks all the time, Don Chaney, who was a taller player than JoJo, I lined him up against Walt Frazier. And JoJo came up to me and he said, Tommy, I'd like to play Frazier. And I said, well, sure, you can play him. And the reason I knew that he would die to make this defensive situation work is because Frazier was considered to be the Beau Brummel of basketball, and JoJo was the most dapper dresser on our team. So it really revolved more around who was the better dresser in their minds.
So you wanted
a basketball game.
You know what I loved about you? I was 15, 14 when you were winning those championships, just getting into it from an NBA perspective. But JoJo was great, Tommy, of pushing the ball up the floor with that number 10. I think it was number 10. Pushing the ball up the floor and pulling up for that one-handed jump shot right around the foul line and extended on both wings. How about that play for a sec? Am I right about that or not?
Yeah, he was an unusual player. I mean, when I say that, he was typical of a player who developed a style of shooting the ball. You know, when you release the ball, most shooters want it to come off your forefinger and your thumb. Those are the last two fingers. And he shot the ball, and the last finger that touched the ball was normally his pinky. And it was like, how did he do that? And he didn't. I had a play where we would set up a double pick for him to get a clean look at a shot right down the middle of the floor, and he didn't like that shot. Everybody else that ever played thought it was great, and but he said, I couldn't see over the center, and I didn't feel comfortable doing it. And the play he liked was on the baseline, to go away from the basket, receive the ball, turn around quick, and take a fall-away jumper.
Wow, that's a tough shot. Wow.
And how he ever made that, and I will tell you, that was his signature shot. And if you listen to ball players, sometimes they come up with great suggestions, and he really came up with some great suggestions for me.
Did it become Tommy Heinsohn on JoJo White passed away last night, 71 years of age? If you don't know who JoJo White was, you don't know those early 70s Celtic teams, mid-70s. Did it become his team, Tom? Havlicek getting a little older. Cowens, you could tell me a little bit more about Cowens than I know Cowens was a rough, great hustle and everything else, but in the mid-70s, did it become JoJo White's ball club? Did Havlicek pass the baton to him as far as being the leader of the team, or was it always Havlicek's team?
Well, it was kind of always Havlicek's team. Havlicek retired the same year that I was asked to leave the premises, and so he finished up that season and retired. And my last season coaching, JoJo had a falling out with the owner, who I called Irv the Swerve. And he was promised a contract by Red Auerbach, and the owner reneged on the deal. And JoJo had an injury to his foot, and they thought he was malingering because of the contract situation. And they ended up trading him the next season. And he finished up his career.
Golden State.
Else.
Yeah, Golden State and then Kansas City. So I didn't realize that. So JoJo had a falling out with the owner. Auerbach could not get in the way there, Tom. He couldn't make it work. I mean, Auerbach is the Celtics. He couldn't make that work in that situation?
Well, the owner is the owner, He's writing the checks. And this guy was a movie mogul, and he thought we were making war and peace, And instead of really embracing JoJo, he's the guy that forced Sidney Wicks and the other guy from UCLA.
Curtis Rowe, right?
Yeah, Curtis Rowe, and he wouldn't sign Paul Silas. And when he called me up to talk about it, he asked me how important I thought Silas was, and I said, well, I don't know the financial end of this because nobody chooses to tell me. But I will tell you, this guy is like the second or third most important player on the team, Paul Silas. So you can't let him get out of the organization. But they thought that they could make up for Silas with Sidney Wicks, and surely it never worked.
Nah, 100%. Now, it took JoJo a long time to get to the Hall of Fame. Tom, he finally did. How come?
JoJo was such a competitive guy. And there were a couple of sports writers that really didn't like JoJo for some reason or other, unjustifiably, in my opinion. JoJo was a complete competitor, but he had a swagger about him. And some of the and when I tell you that, I'm not saying it in a bad way. I'm saying it like Bill Russell had a swagger to him. Bob Cousy had a swagger to him. Even Havlicek. But they didn't like JoJo's swagger. You know what I mean? He'd being the best dressed and all that stuff. It kind of rubbed a couple of these sports writers the wrong way. And so they never in his corner. And it was one of his teammates really were down on Don Nelson.
Don Nelson was down on JoJo, Tommy?
Well, yes, he was. And he made it known to the press, and he had the press's ear, a couple of the guys. And that's
wow, I didn't know that. Nelson played with JoJo White. He was on those teams with you. I mean, why would and Nelly's a Hall of boy? I'm shocked. He didn't like. Well, interesting.
I would tell you the dynamics of people in the world of basketball. You never know. I mean, I play with great players. I coach great players. They're all selfish people.
Well, you can't be great without being selfish.
Absolutely. And that was some of the reason that Nelson wanted to extend his career. He loved playing basketball. He wanted to play till he was 100 if he could. And JoJo was not his type of player. For some reason, I don't know.
Now, you coached them both. You would know better than you played with one. I don't know if you played with Nelson, but you coached him.
No, I never played with Nelson, but I helped get Nelson to the Celtics. the year I retired, I get a phone call from Red Auerbach, and he says, come into the office. I want to talk to you. So I said, okay. So I left my insurance office and went over to see him, and he said, the Lakers just put Don Nelson on waivers. What kind of player is? Should we pick him up? And I said, well, let me tell you something, Red. Don Nelson is the slowest player in the NBA right now. If we had the tortoise in the hare, he'd be the tortoise. But I will tell you this. He's one of two guys playing in the NBA right now that I could never get around. He somehow or other would hook me, get me in between his knees, and I said he can shoot the ball and he can rebound. And if I were you, I'd take him. So they picked Nelson off the waiver list, and that's how he ended as Celtic.
Mid-'60s when Don and then JoJo came a little later on. We'll finish on JoJo in a sec. You must love Brad Stevens. Give me a little rundown he coached both the Celtics. Give me a little rundown on him. What has made him such a good NBA coach here so far?
Well, he lets the players be players. That's my opinion. You never see a player turning his head over his shoulders to look at the bench to should he do something or other. He gives total carte blanche to the players. He gives them guidelines, but he doesn't potentially choreograph every step they take like a lot of coaches do. I call those type of coaches Prussian generals. And what he does is he lets the Celtic be guerrilla fighters, make up what they feel they can do within his system. And there's plenty of opportunities for their own imagination to show up. So they more enjoy playing. He uses a lot of people off the bench. He builds a team, and he creates a morale because everybody feels part of it. And he doesn't criticize players. You never see him look at a player and holler at him coming out of the game. Normally, he just pats him on the butt, and that's the end of that. And he gets their respect because at the X's and O's, he's very, very good. You see him at the end of games come up with these plays that are really different than most people run, and they're normally successful. So he has the total respect of the team, and he has total respect of the ownership and the general manager. So he's a fabulous coach. He's really one of the top quality coaches I've seen in the NBA.
Now, this is a tough one, and there's a million players. You want to put JoJo? I mean, he's, I don't know what number. I'll put him top 20 all time in Boston. You agree with that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, JoJo was on 2 championships and was a significant partner in that. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer, Collins, and Havlicek. Paul Silas ought to be in there also, which he's not. And Don Nelson is in there, but he's more or less in there as a coach. And Satch Sanders played for a while with that team. But JoJo was such an important part of how we were able to play up-tempo basketball. And he really grew as a player as he went along. But the most amazing part was his competitiveness and his willingness to ultimately to be coached. Before every game, he would go in to pick his hair, to fluff up the afro.
Right.
And I would catch him in the mirror, while he was fluffing it up, and I would say to him, JoJo, there's one thing that we really got to key on tonight, and that's this or that, And he would go out there, and that's what he would do. And he was a terrific competitive player. And if he could play, he would have played till he was age 100 because he loved the game. Now,
I tell you always had that big scowl on your face, Tom, but you let him play, too, as a longtime coach. That's Auerbach did, you did. If apple don't fall far from the tree, you let him run up and down and have some fun. And I'll tell you, I'll end with Tommy on this. Tom Heinsohn, folks, played in the first great game in the history of the NBA. It was either double or triple overtime. Game 7 of 56. Celtics and the Hawks. That's Pettit, Russell, Cousy, and Heinsohn. Those are some Hall of Famers on those teams. And then he coached 20 years later in what is viewed as the greatest game of the modern time, the Phoenix that Tommy referred to JoJo 60 of the 63 minutes, triple overtime, game 5, 2 games apiece. Westfall, Alvin Adams, and of course Havlicek, JoJo White, and everything else. So that's pretty good. You played in one of the great games, and you coached in one of the great games. Let me hear some thoughts on that for a sec. Go ahead.
Well, I was on the first Celtic championship team, and certainly that started the ball rolling. It was a double overtime game, and Bob Pettit and Cliff Hagan, and they had really some great players. And Russell and I were rookies, and Bill Sharman and Cousy were the established players. And the two rookies really had the best games of their careers in that seventh game.
What'd you have? 25 rebounds in that? What'd you do in that game, Tom?
Well, I had 37 points and 23 rebounds.
Well, I thought it was 25, so you had 30. What did Russell do in that game?
Russell was like 25 points and something like 25 rebounds too. I mean, he made one of the greatest plays I've ever seen in basketball in that game. Cousy fed him a long pass, and he had to catch it, go up one step, and put it through the hoop on a fast break. And he was going so fast because he was the fastest guy on our team. And he went up to slam the ball through, and it hit the back of the rim and bounded out towards past the free throw line. He himself carried off the floor into the supports. They got the ball. There was a guy named Jack Coleman who was about half court, and they unloaded a pass to him about 5 feet above the foul line on the sideline. And he took one dribble for a layup that would have won the game. And Russell came and blocked the shot. And he ran the length of the court faster than they could make one pass and one dribble. He went by me like I was a Wile E. Coyote, I mean, he was so fast. He was a blur as he went by me.
37 and 25 rebounds for Tommy. All right, then you coached 20 years later. That was one of the, the game was a sloppy game until the end. Then it got phenomenal. You had the big lead. What do you remember as a coach in that Suns game in in June of '76? Let me hear some thoughts on that.
We were sort of the same type of team. I mean, we were not a big center, and Alvin Adams was almost a duplicate of Cowens, except Cowens was an animal, and Adams was more of a
finesse center. Yeah, 100%.
A finesse center. Cowens would kill you for a rebound. I'm not sure Adams would do that, but he was a very, very good player, and their style of play was similar to ours. And they also had a guy that played for me, Paul Westfall, who was on that first championship team and really picked up on a fast break on what we were trying to do. And he, in that game, absolutely played like he was playing for me. At the second half, he was driving to the basket, jumping up in the air, doing a 360, and getting a layup. Which was like part of his repertoire. And when you look at what's going on now, this game went back and forth and back and forth. And, I mean, the fans went after Richie Powers, the referee.
God, unbelievable.
And at the end of the game, they called a timeout that wasn't legal. And
they changed the rule on that. They called the timeout, no timeouts, and they were able to advance the ball to midcourt, which got hurt the shot. They changed that rule. I remember that. You were moaning and groaning. How can you let them do this? They changed the rule in the next offseason, did they not?
Absolutely, and justifiably. How can you gain an advantage from creating a foul situation? Illegal move, and so they changed it. And, I mean, when Hurd made that shot, I just couldn't believe it. After that game, I went into the locker room, and I was sitting there, and the reporters came up to me, and they started talking to me, and all of a sudden I fainted.
Did you really? Wow.
Yeah. And they took me into the locker room, and I was so dehydrated that they weren't sure whether I'd be able to coach the seventh game out in Phoenix, or the sixth game, I should say, out in Phoenix. And So it was precarious for me. But went out there and the first team that could bend over and lace up their sneakers was going to win the sixth game.
Yes, they were. You guys are tired. Give me not Celtics. Give me you could do it via position, or you can do it via just 5 best. You're going to put Russell, who the 4 others in the history of the NBA? Go ahead.
Well, Russell, Wilt. I would say
you're going to put Wilt. You're going to put Wilt there. Okay, got that.
I mean, please. People ask me about the centers, and I say, let me explain it to you geographically. If Russell was here in Boston, Wilt would be in Worcester, Mass. Every other center,
Kareem
Abdul-Jabbar would be around Buffalo, and every other center that played the game is past the Mississippi. So those 3 guys were the preeminent centers of all time. So you got to, not only scoring-wise, but rebound-wise, defensive players. And then you'd have Elgin Baylor, who was the originator of all the great athletic forwards to come along. And then Dr. J and Larry Bird, Jerry West, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson.
For your money, Tommy, who's better, LeBron or Jordan?
I'm going to tell you Russell. Okay.
I'm not going to allow you to do that. I'm going to make you answer that before you let you go. Jordan or LeBron?
They're both. I couldn't take them apart. They're both. I would have to say this: Jordan was probably the fiercest competitor. You could tell when he plays golf. I don't think that LeBron is quite as competitive as Jordan was. They're both superior athletes. One is bigger and knows how to use his body. And LeBron has probably got more skills than Michael Jordan, but passing the ball and being a point guard type of player, that was not Michael Jordan's forte. But but I like personalities. I like to look down deep into the heart of a player to see what they're willing to give of themselves to win. And I think Jordan would win that battle. But I also say Bill Russell used to throw up before every game. So please.
I love you, Tom. I could talk to you all day. Great job on JoJo. Enjoy the ball games. Always a pleasure. Keep it going here. Appreciate it coming on.
All right, babe. Be good.
Take care. Tommy Heinsohn. There you go. You want a little basketball? That's basketball. That's not Rachel Nichols breaking down with Paul Pierce. That's a guy who played in a 56 Game 7, 37 points, 25 rebounds. That's basketball. Jeremy Huber, Sports Bite.